Some of you may recognize this guy sitting next to me. He's the author of a book called Carpe Audience and has perfected and mastered presentations and instructing in a way that you can't imagine. And that's today's topic, how to become a great instructor. Stick around. Welcome to the Active Shooter Risk Management Podcast. My name is Bill Godfrey, your podcast host. We're here at the National Center for Integrated Emergency Response, and I'm joined by John Michael Keys of the I Love You Foundation. Good to have you, John Michael.
It's great to be here.
It's exciting to be back. And we also have two of his proteges at the foundation, Kevin Bird. Kevin, good to have you back in the house.
Great to be here.
And Stacy Avila, thank you for coming back in.
Thank you.
So today we are going to be talking about really becoming a good instructor, how to master that art of teaching. And I thought it might be a great place to start. Talk a little bit about what led you to write the book and develop the Carpe Audience program.
So when we started down this path organizationally, I started going to conferences, and I would see presenters who were compelling and engaging the audience, and yet I'd see the audience dozing off because it was PowerPoint from hell. We've all seen it. And I didn't know it at the time that that's what was happening, but I started doing some homework on brain science. And it turns out that everything people know typically about PowerPoint induces a physiological response. It's involuntary, and it's cognitive overload. When you see all of the same words and the person is reading all of those words at the same time, it breaks your brain. You want to go to the beach. You doze right off. And I started doing homework on that. It was some of Meyer's work on this. Brain science was another one. And I wrote Carpe Audience to kind of capture that whole notion of what a presentation should look like, and then how the presenter delivers it. And we talked about it in one of the other casts. An emotional hook is an important part of delivering a presentation. And we set an emotional hook early because humans learn more efficiently with that. Well, there's science to prove it. And so it started as what am I going to do in my presentations in 2009? And Carpe Audience was a result of, well, let me write this down because people are asking about it.
And it's a magical experience, and I don't use that loosely. It's a magical experience to see you present Carpe Audience as the program and see you walk through it. The book is amazing, which, by the way, it's available as a PDF for free on the foundation's website, right? So we'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. Stacy, Kevin, both of you came to know John Michael under a little bit different circumstances and got to see some of his presentations. What was your reaction first time you saw Carpe Audience? And
in place, and I'll say this mandatory reading list for any instructor with the I Love You Guys Foundation, because it really informs the entire what we're trying to give as a training experience, not just a training class. And so it really has that feel to it. And sometimes it's kind of hard. You can't pinpoint what it was at first, but you knew it had a different feel. And so I really studied tone, inflection, tempo as I watched John Michael present, and really tried to see how could I have that become my own as well.
Yeah. Kevin, how about you?
So for me, again, going back to, we mentioned this in one of the other podcasts also, April of 2010, first time I ever saw John Michael present, but then the pieces came together when I saw Carpe Audience for the first time and then read the book. Now I know what they were doing. Now I know the design behind it. And for me, my father was an educator, 40 years in education. And it was instructors, some have that. It's like the classroom presentation, the PowerPoint keynote, whatever. It's dry. It's a number 8 font on the screen, and it's that death by PowerPoint, what we kind of jokingly refer to it as. But also looking at the way John Michael was presenting, and then going out and observing other instructors with other trainings. And I don't like that, but I really like that, but never having the book or a model of how they got that way, right? Or what we're presenting. That's where it all kind of came together for me.
And for me, I saw it at one of the conferences you were speaking at, and somebody had spoken very highly of it. In fact, at that point, I don't think we had met. I think that was the first time I'd met you watching it, and I'd heard really, really good things about it. And I said, I want to go see this. And there were a number of things that grabbed me right away. But as a lifelong trainer myself, an instructor, I mean, you do a career in public safety, it's hard not to get involved in training and teaching at some point. But one of the things that grabbed me right off the bat is what I'm going to call the format or the appearance of your slides. They weren't the traditional slides that we would normally see. They didn't have bullet points. What it was a full screen photo in most cases, and not typically graphics or image, but an actual photo, and it had one word, sometimes two words, but most of the time one word on it. And the word was in a huge font, like a 96 point or 120 point font. It was huge. And it had been carefully placed in the photo so as not to obstruct the key message of the photo, which always had a specific tie to that one word. So it was like you've got this word that's the topic. So if you think about it from the traditional slide point of view, we'll put in 5 or 6 words as the title of the slide and then a whole bunch of bullet points. And I said, son of a gun, this guy has found a photo that visually illustrates this point. He's narrowed that title down to one word, and there are no bullets. They're in his head, and it's coming out. And I watched you just click and go through this, and I thought, wow, that is pretty cool. It was very engaging. It was quite memorable. And I immediately remember thinking, holy crap, how much practice do you have to put in to remember all these points in the slides on those slide deck? I mean, it was an amazing experience.
You've got to know your material. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and as it turns out, being a good instructor in large part is practice.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Rehearsal. It's essential. And it's part of the fabric of what we do. And rehearsal where it's not you sitting in front of a laptop reading it in your head. It's standing up, grabbing your clicker, and delivering the presentation as if there was an audience there. And with today's skill set of Zoom and laptops, you can record yourself and review yourself. But very early on, it was a videotape camera. You'll have to explain that to the youngsters. Okay. And I set the thing up and I would rehearse the material. And it's evolutionary in a sense because I didn't start out with 8 hours of material, but rehearse it, review it, and do it again. There's a lot of payroll in the room when we deliver a presentation or a training. And we need to, as presenters, as instructors, honor that payroll in the room. And if we are in a presentation and then mucking around on YouTube, that isn't honoring the audience. So if there's a video, get it, embed it, and click through it. And so it's rehearsing not only the material, but the delivery as well.
Absolutely. Kevin, how about you? How important has been that practice and that rehearsing to you in your training career?
It's everything. You have to practice. You have to rehearse the materials. There's nothing worse than getting in front of an audience and you don't know the material. And I think everybody here at the table and those listening have probably been in the room where the instructor questions themselves. They go back to books and, hey, we all have those moments, right? But you need to spend the time to rehearse and the time management. And understanding, hey, if I'm assigned a 15-minute, 30-minute, 45-minute module by myself, what that looks like. And the only way to figure that out is to actually do it. And where it's evolved for me is using Carpe Audience and and one of the other casts we talk about, we send our instructors out with 1,160 some slides ish. And whether we're asked to do a 45-minute, a 4-hour, an 8-hour, we take that slide deck and we reduce it down to what we need. What was the request for the class? What training we're providing? And we reduce that down. We've got to rehearse that. And for me, it's also turned into, I know my slide pace, as well as what I need to get across during this 45, 50 minutes before I give them a break, 2-hour session. I know how many slides I need, so I can start with that. Hey, I can roughly, so I know for me, I'll go through certain presentations, about 125 to 145 slides per session, like 50 minutes or so. So I'll take that 1,100, bring it down to a few hundred, and then I start to practice and rehearse. Because when I get in front of that room, I want to make sure I'm prepared and they get what they came here for. And if I start looking out in the crowd and somebody else if they're on YouTube, if they're texting their buddies or phone calls come in, real world stuff happens, they got to go take a call. But I want to make sure all eyes are up front on me or the instructor if we're working with somebody. And the only way to really make that happen is to rehearse and practice and know your material and set that credibility right as soon as you get in front of them.
Yeah. Stacy, let me ask you this. So I know frequently when I'll do rehearsals on my own, my pacing that I practice seems to be slower than what it turns out to be in the actual classroom. So, you've got an hour and a half session, you got an hour 45, you got a 50-minute session. And so you're adjusting your pacing in rehearsal and you do it enough, you got the timing down, and then something.
It's adrenaline.
Yeah,
right?
You end up going a little bit faster. I mean,
yeah.
What are some of the things that you do to make sure that your rehearsal, you stay on time, I guess?
Right. So that's where I was kind of talking about that tempo and tone and inflection and getting up. I did exactly that in the living room, hooking my laptop up to the television and presenting using the hand motions, gestures, everything that I would do in front of a class. And so then you can just transfer that over, and you have to kind of go outside yourself a little bit. That's the theater of it. So that as you're presenting, yes, I'm making eye contact with the people in the room, but I'm really saying a lot of the same things at the same spot on each slide. And so then you really get your material honed. But then that also allows you, if a question comes up that you're not used to, things like that, this so well, you can focus on the variable that you weren't expecting. And I think that our presentation is unique a little bit. I always kind of say to people, you feel like you're giving a little bit of your soul every time that you've presented. But I think that shows through in that presentation. And it doesn't hurt to have someone create a presentation that's easy to deliver and powerful. That's, if we had, well, and thank you for having us too, with the presumption that we are good instructors. So that's nice. I know this side of the table is, but I always kind of make that joke if people, give you the nice compliment of, wow, what a great instructor, when really I have to say the person that created the training, that makes it makes all the difference, makes it so much easier.
It does, but by the same token, I think the understanding the material and the practice, the rehearsal is a big part. For me, one of the things that I kind of mentally mark 2 slides. The one that is supposed to be my halfway mark. And I go, okay, I know what my time is. When I see that slide, at some point during that slide, I'm going to find a clock in the room, maybe one I've set up. I'm going to sneak a peek at my watch and figure out where I'm at. Am I running long? Am I running fast? How hot am I at about that halfway mark? And then the other one is most of the stuff, and I don't know if this holds true for you guys. Most of the presentations I'm doing, I like to leave, about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. And so I'll have a pacing slide a few minutes before the end so that I can, again, do that time check and make sure that I'm going to have time for the QA. Or if for some reason, sometimes people will ask questions as it goes and it throws your pacing off. So if we've inadvertently done the QA during the presentation, then I adjust the timing out to finish the time. Have you got any tricks like that you've used over the years?
Yes.
And they're trade secrets, evidently, yes.
And they are
trade secrets.
If you get Carpe Audience, the book, yeah.
Which, by the way, is free.
Yes,
we're not hawking it. It's free. Don't get offended.
And talk about your times of breaks.
So we've gotten to the point, and one of the benefits of live stream delivery for us during the pandemic is that we set up studios and stood in front of green screens, because sitting behind a laptop and being a postage stamp was not compelling. And so I felt like a weatherman. And what we learned is 45, 50 minutes, and then let's get at least a solid 10-minute break in. And that 45 isn't bad. And pre-pandemic, we used to do 90-minute sessions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is hard.
Well, it's hard on the audience too, and it's hard on the brain. And so getting to that point where I'm going to run 45 to 50 minutes and then run a break. And if start time was supposed to be 8 and the host had some housekeeping, we did an 8:04 start, and now I've run 47 minutes, well, that's going to mean I'm going to run a 12-minute break in order to get us to the hour again.
Now, I'm unable to do math in public, so mine are 10 or 15 minutes regardless.
She has our rule.
Yeah.
Never do math in public.
Never.
No, it is.
Oh, where do you think I picked that?
Yeah.
Line up from? Yeah.
And to your rehearsal point, I am 10% faster without an audience than with an audience. And that translates to live streams too. Live streams, the same content goes by in 90% of the time of in person. And some of that is human interaction that occurs over the course of it. We don't stand in front of the room. We're walking around the room and making eye contact and the occasional humor. We've identified some folks that may be receptive to a tease. And
Marriage jokes.
Always.
And
I don't
so
understand the.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I thought you were an expert.
He doesn't get the joking part of it. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about recording yourself,
Yeah.
which I think is an extraordinarily valuable tool to record your rehearsals and then watch them back critically. I was watching I'm not sure what to label him. Public speaker isn't fair. Keynote speaker isn't fair. The guy's actually a magician, easy for me to say, does magic stuff, but quite accomplished. Quite accomplished in performing that skill, in being very articulate, very deliberate with body language, things like that. And one of the suggestions that he made, I hadn't heard this before, he says, you're going to record yourself performing it, and then you're going to leave it sit for a day, and then you're going to go back and you're going to watch it 3 times. The first time, you're going to turn your back on it and listen to the audio. Then you're going to restart it again, and this time you're going to turn the audio all the way down and just watch your body language. And then you're going to watch it the 3rd time with both of them together while you're making notes about, okay, I needed to do this gesture. This gesture didn't come through. I was fidgeting here. I was moving around. I never realized all of those little micro body language things that we do as we're shifting weight when we're speaking or, moving around or back and forth. Go ahead.
Mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it could be, it's
What do you mean?
it's
Mr.
emphasis,
Burns.
and it also can be a distraction. So knowing that sweet spot, what's too much, what's not
Yeah.
enough, to really be able to give a compliment to what you're saying instead of taking away from it.
I love that. What
I
you
love
just
that.
meant.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Because you're listening first, and then you're seeing, and then putting it all together. I love that. That is a great tool that should be used. Yeah.
We've got
And
years of, we still do a lot of live streams. And I now have years of seeing myself from either the thighs or the torso up in front of the slides, looking at the camera. And it's fascinating because the camera awareness, where you are in frame, all of that stuff, just in that 8 feet of green screen is revealing.
And the live streams really helped me hone in and tighten my presentation. So yes, you have the benefit of you've got notes that are nearby, but then just really able to hone it in. There was an additional degree of difficulty if you do a live stream from the Keys studio, because usually at some point during class, Bear and the dog will come lay down in front of you. And so then you'll have to step over him as you're moving your way, slide, from side to side for the slide.
What was interesting from my perspective too, once we started doing the live streams, one, getting a chance, an opportunity to see yourself, play it back, and also the pace. Because I was in the same boat, and we have some producers at the foundation that every time John Michael and I do a live stream, we are usually quicker than most others. And it's just, well, we've been doing it for a long time. We know, I see the slide, I know what I'm going to say. I see the slide, I know what I'm going to say. But the tricks you were talking about before, when I build out that 2-hour, 3-hour training tip, I'll throw some cheater slides in there. Maybe there's a couple videos. Now, not trying to fill the time. If somebody books a training needs the 3 hours, I want it to be qualitative, not always necessarily quantitative. If we end a few minutes early, there's time for group discussions and some more Q&A. But I may, during the rehearsal, in case I'm a little bit fast, standard unification method for dispatchers, one of our newer videos. I know it's a great 5 minutes, or actually that one's 7 minutes, I think, but I'll have a couple in there. So if I have the time, I can throw that in there because I went a little bit quicker. There wasn't maybe as many questions in the room. We've been there before. But again, it all comes back to knowing the material and knowing your pace and adjusting based on the conversations. I know we do introductions, if time permits, every single class, whether there's 20 or there's 500 or 320, which we did in like 27 minutes in Minnesota recently. That's going to eat up some clock. So we've got to manage our time from there on out. But some of the benefits we have found from that, we continue to do it.
And the other benefit that I like about introductions is you know your room then. You know who's in your room. You know who you can maybe draw on if you want to do a little joke around with, but also just knowing how to reach this audience. And I do a little research the night before because we were all over the country, right? So I'll kind of look up the town. You talk with people as they're coming in that morning. And so the presentation might have a little different flavor depending on where you're at in the country. You know, if there's...
That's a great point. I know we do it on both sides here. Instructors are there an hour before students ever get there, and you mingle with them as they're coming in. You start building that rapport and those relationships with them right off the bat. I mean, sidetracked, but that's a great point.
No, absolutely.
You know, it's funny. When we were going through the pandemic, and of course we had to change gears on all fronts on how we did training, how we interacted with people, and all of these companies and corporations very quick to pronounce the death of the office, and you know everything was going to be remote from here on out. Schools right at the top of that list, and the whole time I never believed that was going to be successful. There's a magic that happens when you have live interaction with people, when you can read body language and face to face. You know, for example, I know we talk about timing and rehearsal. I'm looking for that audience engagement. And when I say engagement, I don't necessarily mean talking to them or drawing things out of them, though sometimes that's a part of it. Sometimes you're asking questions and looking to get some feedback. But I mean looking at their body language. Are they locked on? Are they lost? Do you have them yet? You know, have they bit? Are they buying into what you're doing yet? And I find myself occasionally, and we all know how that is, you know, you start 8 a.m. and there's, in public safety world, there's people that they just came off shift. They've been up all night. They're tired. They were voluntold to be there and not necessarily warmed up and receptive yet. And I find myself going off script there to try to steer it because there's this energy in the room or the flavor of the audience where you'll say something and you'll see, that hit.
Yes.
Let's poke at that a little bit and see if we can get that going. Now, The goodness of that is you get the audience engaged. The badness is it blows your time tracking.
Right.
What are, because I know I've watched you do that in working a room, because you just won't let them on break until you own them. So what are some of the
Or 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Whichever comes first.
We have to go to the bathroom because we're old. Yeah.
Poking the audience, that was an interesting way of thinking about it. And sometimes, yeah, I just like people, and sometimes it's just fun to interact with people. I had an experience in Texas pre-pandemic, and it was a small group. It was an afternoon training, so it was an in-service day, and there was humor in this room. And so a couple chuckles as we get started, couple jokes, they laughed. But at one point, I said something, she said something, I said something back, she said one more thing, and I lost it.
Yeah.
I could not, I lost the room to laughter. I had to say, hey, okay, it's been 10 minutes, you guys. I gotta come back and finish this. I've got, sometimes getting the room back from break, you've got to play with them. And one of the ones that I enjoy a lot is, shh, he's about to start talking, into the lab.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And sometimes people look around,
Like,
who said that? And Brian Murphy gave me one that's fun. And we use a prop, a reunification card, handing the card to somebody, and they aren't sure if they want to take it. And you look them in the eye and say, work with me here, okay? And that line, just the audience enjoys it. And that was a gift from Brian Murphy. And so there are moments to leverage those little gifts and go.
And paying attention to the room, like you said, you'll have a warm room sometimes where it just is comfortable right from the start. Sometimes the room can feel kind of cold and you try to get it warmed up a little bit. But then knowing, okay, I was going to go to lunch at 11:30, but people are starting to nod, 11:20, all right, we're going. So being able to think on your feet enough to cut your time, give them a break if need be.
Activation phenomena.
Yeah.
Introductions. I think it might be worth
Yeah.
It's
some
more
of the
brain science.
brain science.
Yeah.
Why?
Part of our motivation in introductions is understanding who's in the room. I'm also looking for some specific roles. Do we have victim advocates in the room today? I've got dispatch in the room today. So some of the public safety partners that aren't always invited to a training. And what was the question?
Activation phenomena, yes.
Brain science.
Yes, brain science.
But that introduction also makes it easier for folks to raise a hand and ask a question later.
Because they've already spoken up, so they're going to be more likely
And
to
so
speak up later.
that's part of the activation phenomena. And then we always come back from break. Any questions? Any comments? Any heartburn? And sometimes questions come up, but that very first break, usually there's a shyness in the room. And so I'll ask a question of myself, and people forget that I asked the question, so it kind of broke the ice about Q&A.
And you always know the answer then,
I
too.
do.
Yeah.
And typically I remember the question.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about this in a little bit different way. And let me kind of set the context for this. There's so I enjoy listening to a number of podcasts, almost all to do with professional development, business, that kind of thing. And there was a particular person I was listening to who is not just an expert in sales from a business perspective, expert in sales and marketing, but just really good at it. And he's a really good teacher, which is why I enjoy listening to him. He's And I wouldn't say that he was a natural speaker. I think he's trained himself to be good. But he's a great teacher, and he's a great salesman. And it made me think out loud one day, is he a great salesman because he's a great teacher? Or is he a great teacher because he's a great salesman? And then I took this the step further, because we're not selling in our classes. We don't sell in our classes, except we do. Mm-hmm. We're literally asking the audience to buy in. Mm-hmm. What we're selling them is we want your attention. We want your time. We want your attention. We want your focus on this topic. And then we want you to do something about it. We want you to buy in today and go to work tomorrow. And all of a sudden, this thought clicked in my head. We are selling. We're not selling for money, but we're trying to get you to buy in.
And it's still a transactional relationship, right? So if they see how much you've bought in, how important it is to you, they start paying attention, because maybe this should be important to them as well. And one of the things that I think you talked about, the slide design that John Michael's created, where it's just a photo and a word, you've already got their attention, because then they're thinking, what are they going to say about this? And so if it's just the bullet points, well, we already know what they're going to say about this, but it captures their attention, because then they need to listen to you.
And it's funny you say that, because you said the passion that you've got, how much you've bought in. And one of the things that hit me is, it's not really, do you believe? The belief is not black and white. It's not binary. It's how much do you believe? Mm-hmm. How much? Because if we're going to transfer our belief, if we're going to transfer that sense of buy-in, that sense of this has value, then we have to believe in it ourselves, and not just a little, but a whole lot. Otherwise, we're not in a position to transfer that belief to the audience. Have you ever thought about it in that context, in those terms? I'm hitting with you cold, so sorry about that.
There's a couple things. You use two words that might be synonyms. And if we were to look at what is the role of a salesperson and what is the role of a teacher, there's a lot of overlap right there, okay? We're going to listen, we're going to understand the needs, and then we're going to project a pitch. And we are absolutely providing incentive for people in the audience to learn more about our programs, use our programs, but it's a low-key sales pitch. It really has been traditionally, take a look. If it fits in your environment, you can download it at no cost. Mm-hmm. Well, that is a sales pitch, okay? But it's not a hard close. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
It's not a cost of money, but it's a cost of your time and attention.
Time and attention.
And I just 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think that resonated with me. I don't think I made that connection. It's like, like you just said, checklist is on our website. Mm-hmm. It's free. There's guidance that goes with it. There's training that goes with it. There's documentation that goes with it. You don't need training from us to use this. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people want it. Same reason they call you for training on standard response protocol and standard reunification method. There's value in doing that. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought these are almost synonyms, the same. And what really hooked me was the concept of I'm asking the audience to buy in. Buy is in the very thing that I'm asking them to do. I am kind of selling. And where I'm going with this is our recent instructor development session. Kevin, you were here. We did this not too long ago. We had a full day of just doing instructor development, body language, coaching, tone, pause, presentation, all of those skills. But we also spent a couple of hours on sales and watching some educational material from this very guy I'm talking about, talking about how to do what he calls the logical close. But the way he walked through the logic of this and getting people to make a decision, it's not important that you do or don't buy from me. It's important that you make a decision. And my job is to help you make that decision. Kevin, what were your thoughts from that, and how did that impact you, the idea that this is wrapped in it?
And I remember you talking about the buy-in, and then you brought into the professional development we ran here. And it makes total sense. Like, we don't want to say when we're out there, hey, I'm trying to sell you this thing. Because when you use the word sell, there's usually a dollar sign behind it, right?
Sure, it's assumed.
We're trying to give you some context, and then you take action on what we've just provided you. And having that mindset that, because I always viewed it as, I can't sell this. I'm not up here. We're not selling this. We're not selling this class. It's a free grant-funded DHS class. We're not selling anything here, folks. No, right. But we don't want to sell it. But what we're giving you is the tools to take back, to have the discussion, take action, right? And that's what it's all about.
And don't you think that's actually more valuable than just the money in a checkbox?
Yeah.
Because we really want people to use these programs. So the time and attention, that's a higher value. And then taking the action, that's you're absolutely selling that.
Yeah. So I think you have to have a little bit of the mindset of the salesman. You don't want to walk in front of a room and say, I really don't like selling pens, but will you give me $5 for that one? I know there's a whole selling the pen, whole other side conversation that somebody used.
Is that how your last marriage ended? I don't know.
Yeah, I could have. I got this house for no. But no, how many times have we been in the room and somebody's gotten up there and they've tried to sell you something? Because
it's hollow. It's a hollow feeling.
Hollow. Yeah. It's not.
You don't even feel that they believe it themselves.
Exactly.
And that's why I was saying, hey, I got these pens. They look pretty cool, right? You want to buy one? That's not gonna buy in on that. But if you can approach it in a way where it makes sense for who's listening to it, and you give a little bit of leeway, and I know we stole this from you years ago, right? We're showing you a way. It's not the way. If anybody ever stands in front of you and says, this is the way to do something, buy them a Happy Meal and show them the way to the door, right? Not giving you the way. Take a look. If it works for you, great. But if nothing else, we've given you some tools, some context. Go do something with it. Become an advocate, become a champion, go back and follow up on this, have some discussions. And hey, maybe not every single piece of the checklist will work. Maybe not the 5 actions, complete side conversation, right? Going over, doing some international stuff there. Hold and secure don't translate as well overseas as it does here. That's okay. You still got lockdown, evacuate, and shelter in place. Those discussions can still continue to happen. So you want to make sure that when you're presenting this, you've got the heart, you've got the passion, you've already bought in, or there's no sense in you being in front of the room at that point.
That is also the secret hidden agenda. And we've got a series of objectives, whether it's a 45-minute presentation or an 8-hour day. And we want to achieve these objectives. And if we have an 8-hour day, there may be more objectives and a greater understanding of some of the materials and programs, but we still have an objective. And one of our objectives is getting the right people in the room elbow to elbow. And so law enforcement doesn't have a lot of opportunities to sit down elbow to elbow with administrators or teachers. And so if we give them that opportunity, we gave them an introduction, the cop can notice, oh, look, that's a person from the school down the street that I didn't know. They may get together during a break and say, hey, I'm John Michael. And so the people in the room facilitating the introductions, we talked about our instructors are greeting people as they're coming in, and we're walking the room. We love to have lunch in the room. If there's lunch in the room, we're having lunch with the participants. And we also make it a point that we're the last one out the door. If there are still folks around, anyone beyond the host, and I'm done, I'm just going to talk to that person. Why are they still here?
Yeah, we want our instructors first one in, last one to leave.
Yeah.
To me, there's a basic etiquette that has to be followed. And it's like Kevin was talking about earlier. You know, we use the pitch that it's a way, not the way. You know, maybe and in a lot of ways, those are the soft sell. We believe, you know, we believe in the checklist. You guys believe in the SRP, SRM. We
believe in the checklist
we
as
all
well.
believe
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yeah, we all believe that. We have that belief. We know that it will work. We know that it has worked, and we know that it's good. We also know that they're the national standards.
Yeah.
You know, this checklist is a national standard for managing hostile events. Yours is the national standard for reunification and for responding in school events. But you can't, even though you have all of that belief, there are some people that'll take that on face value and they'll buy in. Most won't. And so you have to almost ratchet down the intimidation, because for many, in order to get there, in order for the student to get there to buy in, they have to find a reason to disregard the way they've already done it, or the way that they do it around there, or that policy that they just spent 2 years doing, you know, whatever. And you have to kind of give them that off ramp to say, you know, just give it a thought. You know, maybe it doesn't completely apply, but just give this a thought. And if you can get that barrier threshold down to where they actually will look at it, consider it, and work through some of the challenges, they very quickly realize, this kind of is a really good way, and there's apparently a reason these are national standards.
And do you think it's because, like, for the foundation, for example, coming in with a little humble confidence and offering it as, hey, take a look at it. Also offering, I had never been in a training before where they said, if anything we say gives you heartburn, let us know. Let's talk about it. You know, so you're already offering up, if you don't like it, let's talk about why. And so then that it does break down some of those walls from the people that are sitting there with your arms crossed at first of, this isn't how we do it around here. And then by the end of the day, yeah, this makes sense.
I think a lot of times the first obstacle we have is the two things everybody hates, right? Change in the way things are.
Yeah, right?
Right? So, but if we present it in a way that it doesn't make any sense for us to send 1, 2, 5, 10 instructors to show you how to do it your way.
Right.
We're giving you something that's had some research done. We're out doing this. It's been recognized as national standards. They were just, here it is. Take a look at it.
Yeah. We believe in the process. That's why we traveled here. We're trying to help. If you have some heartburn or disagreement, ask us why. There's a reason, and I know this to be true for both of our curricula. There's a reason why we're saying what we're saying and why these processes are doing what they're doing. And if you got a question, ask, because we're happy to share with you the reasons.
Right.
You know, you
Challenge us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that's
Says
also
who?
With what proof?
With what proof?
Do you think that's also why it's so important to have your instructors have a little credibility? So whether they're a practitioner in some regard, whether, you know, education, first responders, right? So there's a little bit of credibility of what I'm saying is true.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, Kevin, you mentioned the obstacles, overcoming obstacles. In sales parlance, they say the obstacles come up before you ask for the sale, and then objections are what occurs after. And if you fail to deal with the obstacles before the ask, they will show up as objections. And so one of the things that we drilled in our instructor development was obstacle overcomes. And it was really quite fascinating because I made the instructors, we had 20-some instructors here.
Yeah.
I made them all make lists of every obstacle or every objection, everything that was a reason why this won't work here. And then we compiled it into this big list. And we went through every single one of the lists with the instructors and said, okay, explain how to get over that. How do you, what's the overcome for this objection? What's the overcome for this one? What's the overcome for that one? And it was so fascinating that we went into a class. It was just a couple weeks later. It was a couple weeks later. It was a class actually here in Florida. And I I said to the team, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So right after we got through our normal opening sequence, I said, okay, I want you to tell me, I got a big whiteboard up front of the room, and I said, I want you to tell me how you would completely and totally mess up an active shooter response. Funny thing, brain science, we humans have a lot better idea catastrophizing. Did I say that right?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Making things worse than they actually are.
There it is.
That's the title, catastrophizing.
Yeah. For the transcriber, I have no idea how to spell that either. So we can and you think about it from a public safety perspective, we're always taught to think
Worst case scenario.
in worst case scenario. So I asked the question, tell me what you would do to completely mess up the response and make it the worst possible response you could. And it was a list. And it was the very list of things that we talk about in the curriculum that was coming up over the next 3 days. And I'm like, oh, this is so good. And then I moved on to part number 2. And I said, now, I want you to work with me here on faith. Everything that you've just said here on this list is absolutely true. If we did every one of these things, we would have a horrible response to an active shooter event. I said, now, if we did the opposite, how do you think it would go? If we avoided doing all these things and we did the opposite of these things, everyone's like, I think that would go pretty good if we avoided making those mistakes. I said, okay, great. Now, turn the whiteboard around. Give me the list of all the reasons why you can't do this here.
Yeah.
And they go, what do you mean? And I held up the book and I go, this book contains all of the answers to all of these things as I spun the board around and tells you how not to do these things and how to have a great response. And I spun the board back around to the white side. I said, now give me the list of all the reasons why you can't adopt this here. And boy, they started coming in. Headquarters will never buy it. The chief will never sign off on it. If it's not their idea, it's not a good idea. That's not the way we do it around here. I don't like your terminology. I mean, the list, it was a fascinating experience. It was a fascinating experience. I think one of the things that really surprised me, though, is over the course of the 3 days, how all of the other instructors kept referring back to that list, because that whiteboard sat off to the side for 3 days. And they kept referring back to how to mess it up and all the reasons why it wouldn't work here.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. Have you ever tried anything like that?
Well, we do it a little different. We've got a secret weapon, and that's our hidden asset. And that is, we know what we're going to talk about next. And looking at objections that might come up during reunification, I can address the obstacle while we're still talking about the SRP. Mm-hmm. And so I know this objection is going to come up way down here because it has before. Mm-hmm. First time it came up, I got my attention. Second time it came up, now it's a thing.
Right.
But I can address that objection in part of a different conversation so that by the time I get to that one's gone.
Do you remember
You've
we
overcome
said?
it.
Well, and the one thing I've noticed as you go around the country, as varied of environments and places there are, a lot of it's the same. You get the same questions, the same concerns, the same why this won't work.
Yeah.
And so once we have the answers to that, and they're credible answers, we're done. Yeah.
And I'll say this out loud. One of the ways to become a great instructor is to have the conversation more times than the people that you're teaching,
Yes.
so that you're not surprised by the
Right.
questions. You've already had this conversation,
Right.
not once, not twice, but dozens of times. You know the answer, you know what works.
And there's a little trick that you can do. I bet some of you are thinking about, we even
Oh, yeah.
have it, is this picture giving you heartburn, right? And let's just address the elephant in the room right away, take it head on. That's another little piece of adding credibility, because it's like, oh, they're not afraid to talk about anything. And I think that's really important in our presentation. We're obviously not afraid to talk about anything. We're going to talk about it. And if I learn so much from all of the different places I go to, and then we have this kind of internal joke, we can spread those seeds then around the country, or IEDs. Blow it up
one way or
someplace.
another.
Yeah, one way or the other. I was setting you up
That's
for
where
that
we're going.
joke there, Kevin,
I
and you
know.
completely see
I
this
was
is
being
our issue.
sensitive to the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
You afraid we're going to get a cease and desist from Homeland Security again?
Again.
Yeah, we got a memo from that on the headquarters. It's no longer search and destroy. It's sweep and clear.
Sweep and clear.
Yeah.
But no, we're planting seeds.
Yeah.
It is.
And we're hoping to take it back and do something with it, grow it.
We had a really interesting experience. Too much information. Are we giving the kids too much information? And Dr. David Banke, he's a retired math teacher now, and sometimes wizened elder to all of us. And he wrote a list. Are we giving our kids too much information? And he wrote this list down, and it's about 10 items.
Yeah.
And it goes like this. Are we giving our kids too much information? You bet we are. And I have an audience member then read each one of those. And that's where I've got more than 7 words on the slide. I've got the one sentence. And I start pacing it so that I'm switching that slide as they're reading the last word. So there is an ongoing cadence of an audience member reading it. And it's been a riot.
And it was so powerful because we kept getting that question, hey, if the majority of the time suspects in these events, are we training them then about what to expect? If we train them on drills or have these conversations with them, that's too much information. But going through, we're telling them, people are coming to stop them. We're telling them that entry through glass will be difficult. And all of these points in the hopes that ultimately a different decision is made and the event doesn't occur at all.
It's funny. One of our instructors, I won't say which ones, has the phrase,
Kevin?
No.
No, okay. Shoo.
Allegedly. You can tell me later. He has a phrase that he says in class. When these events occur, we're not dealing with rogue members of SEAL Team 6.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the kids that live in mom's basements and are genetic rejects. They're, or some other colorful, metaphor of the level of what the perpetrator, where they're at, what they've done. Yeah. And that's not to say that there have not been instances where they've been very well prepared, very methodical in their planning.
Training. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, no matter their skill set, we still have an obligation and a duty, an obligation to respond and a duty to act and to solve that problem. And I don't think that ever goes away. No. And when you look at it through that context, we're there to help people who have a responsibility to respond and a duty to act on both sides, whether it's public safety or schools. To think that they don't want to do their best or we're not going to be the best instructor, that's just hard to buy into.
Yeah. But it's this important. I end every training this way, that the importance of us training harder and harder and getting better, because I don't want our story to be any one of your stories. And it just sits, this is why we do this. So do some get away from us? Yeah, do we? But we have to keep getting better. We have to plan. We have to prepare. And we have to be able to respond in a way to stop it.
Completely agree. All right. I'm going to do a quick lightning round. Your best tip for instructor development.
Instructor development?
Well, getting better. For an instructor to get better, they care enough that they want to be better.
Care enough to be better.
See, he knows the answer to every question.
It really is. It's bring your best game to everyone. I mean, sometimes it feels like it's and it's no longer a lightning round. It's a extemporaneous chatter. And we're doing the same thing sometimes, and it feels like Groundhog Day. But I don't get that. It doesn't feel like Groundhog Day to me. I grab the time zone that I'm going to as I'm getting on the airplane. Okay. By the time I'm at the venue, I'm in the time zone. I'm there for that group of people. And while some of the words may be the same that I said last time, it's a different group of people. It's a different vibe. And if you honor the audience, if you're there for them, it doesn't feel like Groundhog Day.
Well, and I think as many times, how many thousands of hours have probably both of us seen you present? I watch it with I get something every time. Every single time. It is still enjoyable to watch, even though I'm saying, well, sometimes I'm like, no, don't, I say this there, right? But it is still an enjoyable presentation. You're still having that impact, right?
And if it feels like Groundhog Day, it may be time to, again, explore careers and services.
Because that's going to translate to the audience if it feels like you're just doing this rote, you know.
And that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I was just saying, Kevin, you're up. Lightning round.
Rehearsal.
Watch how long this one goes.
I'm from Jersey. It'll be quick. Rehearsal. And if you're going to be in front of the room doing this, be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Stacey?
You make me go last, and these are the two great answers.
Well, no, I'm going to add mine too, but go ahead.
No, so I'll be sandwiched in between great answers and then have mine. So just knowing, challenge yourself. Know your potential, reach above that, know your audience. I think that's probably some of the best advice. And have fun. If you're not having fun, that will also translate to the room.
Oh, I'm going to lightning round back.
All right.
Our first or second or third slide is we're not an expert.
Yeah.
We are avid students. And so not being an expert gives us permission to be part of the room.
Part of the room. And you do. That's another thing that I do a lot is I'll ask a question back. Well, what would you guys do here? How would you handle this, right?
Alex Trebek's not happy right now. This went from a lightning round.
Well, there was no music playing over.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think Carla just held up the 60 minutes sign. So here's what I'm going to say is if you're going to be an instructor, be a professional instructor. But let me define what I mean by that. It means know your material, rehearse, be there early, not on time, early. Be present, be committed. Pay attention to your speaking patterns, your body language, your audience engagement, the feedback that you're getting. Have passion. And importantly, make sure that your commitment, your belief is way up there on that scale of 1 to 10. That, to me, is being a professional instructor. It has absolutely nothing to do with the title and nothing to do with your payroll or anything else. It has to do with how you approach the task and those individual skills that you do. So thank you guys once again for a fascinating conversation. John Michael, I can't thank you enough for bringing your team down here to Orlando to sit into the studio with us for several podcasts. Thank you, Carla, for making us look good as always. And until next time, stay safe.